guys, welcome back to the Pastor to Pastor podcast. We are so excited to be with you for another episode. I'm here with Pastor Robert, or in Pastor to Pastor world, we just call each other our names. So I'm here with Robert Pooley, Dan Livingston. Obviously, my name is Brad. We're so excited to be having this conversation today, dealing with, it's kind of a broad topic, but essentially what we're talking about is perseverance through difficult times. And dare we say difficult people?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think that's kind of what the nature of what we've leaned into. Both of us wrote some blogs that's up on the site at this point, and really dealing with, mine was coming from the perspective of the guilt of rest.
Right.
But so we wrote a blog called The Guilt of Rest. We recorded a podcast for it with Josh Lipscomb, which was great. Really great content about just resting as pastors, and a big part of what we do as pastor to pastor is that I wrote a second part to that, kind of identifying a season of my life where I hit the wall and needed rest and was dealing with the guilt of rest while also just running at a really high speed, which we'll get into that in just a little bit. And then Pastor Robert, you wrote a blog as well, kind of dealing with similar but different. Kind of give us the rundown of that.
It's a similar thing, because yours dealt with a person and dealing with some interpersonal relationships between other people, and how you kind of got sucked into that.
Yep.
Social media has a way of sucking us into things. So, one of the things I've been noticing is there's been all kinds of situations with pastors that have been exposed, and rightfully so in a lot of the cases. But then if you're a pastor and you kind of are zipping through social media, X or Facebook or Instagram or whatever, TikTok, anything, you see these quotes and you see the comment section, and I don't know why, it's like crack or something. You just feel drawn to those comment sections. Right. And you get into the comment sections and you're reading comments that say, well, this is why I don't go to church. This is why I don't trust pastors. This is why I stay away from mega churches. This is why we just have a little fellowship at the home. Mm-hmm. And you read that, and you just kind of get sick to your stomach, because you're thinking, is this what everybody thinks? Is this, does the whole world think this way about pastors and that sort of thing? And talked about how you deal with some of those feelings.
Yep. Yeah, it's huge. It's huge. And I know you pastored for a long time.
A few years.
So this isn't anything new for you.
No, it's nothing new for any pastor. It's part of the journey. It's a sad part, on both aspects. Personal, when you're dealing with people that you poured your life into, and then all of a sudden there's a complete different attitude. You're the best thing that ever happened, and then suddenly there's a loss of confidence. You're attacking my character. It's one thing to attack or have an opinion on how we do something, but when there's an attack on the personal character, it takes it to a whole new level. Not only with the church, but with you personally, because these are people that you have been their spiritual leader. You've poured your life in. You've married their kids. You've counseled them through hard times, and it was your voice that they followed for so long, and then suddenly your voice is stained because of an opinion, not a fact. And so you've got that, and then just the whole spectrum of, pastors going through failure, and now every other pastor in the world, their character is being based on what someone else did, and now it's public.
Well, it's become a movement. It's Church Too, hashtag Church Too.
Yeah.
I was going to say look it up, but don't look it up. You're going to be very disappointed.
Yeah.
And what it's done for pastors, and that's who we're talking to, is it's given us this idea that, man, I need to be doing something else.
Yeah.
Anything else. I would rather do anything else than be looked upon that way unfairly.
Yeah, it's so true. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, to me, I've walked through it personally. That's one thing. But then when you're watching your son walk through it,
Yeah.
You know, you want to go to battle now. You know,
Right.
It's like, okay, I could be quiet when it was me, but now, and you know, and you
this
see,
is my dad, by the way. In case this is your first podcast, that's my dad.
Yeah. and not a physical battle. You know, we're not looking to fist fight anybody.
Well,
I'm just saying, you know, maybe sometimes,
no,
but
yeah.
you know, but the reality of it is, you know, this is not just my son, but I've watched him live. I know his life. You know, and yes, he's flawed like the rest of us, but areas of attack and slander, you know, are not true.
Right.
And yet you have to sit there and watch social media blow up, and he's got a wife and, you know, a church and everything else, and you watch, you know, just negative things be said, and, you know, you want to say so much, but then, you know, you're just creating more of issues that you have to deal with. So it's very real. It's what I guess I'm trying to say, and it impacts way more than one person. It impacts the sphere of influence of that person.
It's really given me a lot of sympathy and empathy for guys like Stephen Furtick and Chris Hodges and even Michael Todd. You know, I don't agree with all of those guys on a lot of things. Pastor Chris Hodges, I would probably say I agree with him more than I do with Stephen Furtick or Michael Todd. But at the end of the day, we're still talking about three men that are responsible for leading very substantial organizations, and I believe that they want their character to be above board. And you think about the level of scrutiny and all that these guys go through every time they put a sermon online, that you know you're going to have 500,000 people cutting it up and you know, doing whatever. And some of it is, you know, maybe rightfully challenged or whatever, but at the end of the day, we're still talking about, it gives me sympathy for, like, when I look at them. And one of the things that I had to do, you know, is kind of is sit back and say, you know, I can't defend myself to everybody. I can't, like,
right.
It's kind of like you. It's like, first of all, I can't give this more airtime than it deserves, right? If I address it, now I'm giving it airtime. Then people are going to ask what it is and go look for, like, so. And in my particular case, it was pretty private. Like, it was, first of all, it wasn't my issue; it was someone else's issue. They just didn't agree with how I handled their issue. But still, if you try to address it, now you're giving it airtime. So now you're bringing people that weren't even involved in it. So you don't.
Right.
So you don't address it. So you don't ever defend yourself. I've always bought into. Go ahead.
It's even hard to defend other people.
Right, and for me, it wasn't really defending myself. It was more defending others that were innocent.
Right.
And you know, I've always bought into what you taught me in ministry, which is the truth needs no defense. Right, like your enemies don't want an explanation, and your friends don't need one. So it's like I've always bought into that, and then I really was watching. I went back and I thought about, you know, when different people were being scrutinized, whether it was Chris Hodges or Greg Surratt or Stephen Furtick or whoever, just put any name you want in there of a big-time pastor, how they didn't feel the need to constantly defend themselves because they could never do ministry if they were always on the block trying to defend themselves. And it's like, we're just going to do what we do, and if people like it, great. If they don't, great. That's, you know, God will sort that out. And so I know in my season, it was one of those things where it was like, I'm going to deal with this locally, but outside of that, I'm not going to try to champion my own voice out there. It's just going to be what it's going to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, the scripture tells us very simple, you know, if your brother sins against you, go to him.
Yeah.
And you know, we get asked this often when there's a situation out there that's, you know, dealing with a church or a pastor or something. Well, why don't you say something publicly? Well, you put anything out there, it can be 100% correct. It can be with a right heart and a right spirit.
Yep.
And now you're going to get it tore apart.
Yeah.
I just experienced this.
You know,
I just went through this on X. A pastor friend of mine, just some wild things said about him that really, you know, we believe to be patently not true.
Yeah.
It's not proven with the character of what we know of the person. Other things that he has in place, system, structure, that sort of thing. It's just not possible what they're saying. And somebody had said something, and it really irked me. And I just said, you probably should preferably reevaluate. I mean, that's kind of thing. I know this person, and you know, I immediately within about 5 minutes, I got a text from a friend of mine and says, "I know these people. Do not engage." And I go, oops, well, that's already done. So I didn't engage from that point on, and it blew over, but immediately just the thing started. And it wasn't just the person who made the post, but it was all the people, and then you've got this whole army of people coming against you.
That's right, man.
Right?
That's
and
right.
it was just,
that's how
it's just one of those things where I go, okay, it's best that I hate that because it wasn't like I was trying to, if it had been me, I'd have just let it ride.
Yeah.
No,
that's what I tell him often. I think like whether it's just me as a person or my generation, I don't know what it is. I tend to do really well staying out of the comment section.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know why. I think he likes to jump in the comments a little more often just to try to defend the innocent is his perspective. And I'm always the one that's like, leave that alone. You know what I mean? Like I have a saying, it's like, not my monkey, not my circus type of thing.
No,
so I'm like, I'm leaving that alone. But he'll jump in the comments a little more often than I will. But we recently had the same thing happen. There's a situation, it kind of blew up in our city for quite a few days, and people were asking us, you guys need to say something. You guys need to say something. And I was like, I'm not saying. First of all, if I say something, you're probably not going to like what I say, and as much as you think you would. And secondly, it's the scene from Shooter. I don't know if you've seen that movie with Mark Wahlberg at the very end. He burns the evidence, and the guy's like, what are you doing? He's like, this is plutonium. Like, anyone that touches this dies. Like, and I kind of feel the same way. It's like, this is nuclear, man. Like, if you touch it, you're diseased. It doesn't matter if you're on the right side of it doesn't matter what side you're on. So I think there's a level of that shows up with some of this where it's like, man, some of this is just not what I need to be speaking to. But then some of it is like we're talking about with the blogs, is like things that you can't, like, it's on your doorstep. As pastors, this is on your doorstep. And I would even say not just pastors, but also organizational leaders. So maybe you're a business person or something like that. You may deal with some of this as well, where it's like shows up on your doorstep and you have to deal with it. So I think that's really, really big.
What do you say to pastors who, talk to you and say, hey, look, I just read all this, and this is how they're attacking this person, and it's I don't know why, but it's put a level of fear in my life. I'm afraid, even though I know I'm trying to do everything right, I'm still questioning my own self, because you talk about this, where we tend to look at the worst and the best of ourselves.
Yeah.
What do you say to pastors who say, I'm just so afraid of it, that the easiest thing immediately that comes to my mind is not be a part of it, not be in ministry, just go do something else?
That's such a great question. Oh man, I think it's there's two things that I would say. The first one is, you never got into ministry to get man's approval.
Right.
You got into ministry to be a good son.
Right. To
the Father, and vengeance is mine, says the Lord. Right? And so I think that that there's an element of, they hate you, they hated me first, that we just have to be okay with. Yeah. Nick Saban says, if you want to be in a profession where everyone likes you, don't be a leader, sell ice cream.
Yeah, who said that?
Nick Saban.
I don't know who that is.
And I think that is also a level of this where it's like, you just don't, if you got into this thinking you're always going to be liked, you just got in the wrong business.
Yeah. The
second half of that is, there does come seasons when you're like, why am I doing this? Like, why do I want to keep doing this? So you said yes to being a good son, but then I think the second part of dealing with that is, you have to refocus on the things that you're doing right.
Right.
And you have to look in the mirror and assess who you are. I loved what you said earlier when you said, I want to look for confirmation.
Yeah.
Right? Is this true about me?
Yeah.
Is this a problem? Like,
you've got to be self-aware.
Right, exactly. And so is this a problem? Like, do I have this issue? And find someone in your camp to go, like, put this in front of, hey, I want to know the truth about me, instead of just putting your flag in the ground and being like, no, that's not true. Like, that's a low level of self-awareness, in my opinion. I think you have to take all of it and say, it's kind of the agree with your adversary type language, where it's like, all right, I know this isn't true. Let me take a step back and reassess it. But then, just like I said, I think the big thing is understanding where your validation comes from. And I'll add this. I was talking to a guy in our church who works for a very big company in our city. And he's a very prominent, very high level, high tier, big leader, like sits in the big chair kind of guy in our church. And he has had an opportunity to go to a different organization and make a lot more money and deal with more headaches. And then he had another opportunity to go to another place and make a lot less money and deal with a lot less headaches. And he said, I'm really thinking about taking the less money just because I can deal with less headaches. And the thing I told him is this, and I think every pastor has to grab a hold of this, is some people were created to be problem solvers. And it doesn't matter where you go, you're the guy that sees the problems and people come to you to solve them. So for the pastor that's out there going, I don't even know if I want to do this anymore. Well, here's the reality. If you go work at the gas station, or if you flip burgers at McDonald's, or if you get a position at the local marketing firm, or if you work as an accountant, you're going to find yourself solving people's problems because that's what God called you to do. So here's the reality. You can do it walking in your calling, or you can do it walking away from your calling, but you're still going to be the problem solver, and people are still going to be mad at you somewhere, and people are still going to disagree with you somewhere because you're a problem solver. And every time you solve someone's problem, someone's mad about it and someone's happy about it because you didn't solve it the way some people wanted you to. Like, you're always going to be in that tension. So you might as well be in that tension in your calling as opposed to being in that tension out of your calling.
I think that's so good, and the idea of the tension, because it is a tension.
Yeah.
You know, you have to deal with it. It's normally there, and you can't ignore it.
Yeah.
You know, if you ignore it, the problems get worse, the problems don't get solved. And if you do, somebody's going to get hurt, or they're going to have a different opinion, and you're going to have to face that. And that's part of the calling. It's part of what we signed up for.
Absolutely.
Nobody explained it to us when we were starting.
Right, exactly.
But it's part of what we signed up for.
But that's true, you know, and you were talking earlier about it, about the tension, you know, and so just full transparency, if you go read the blog, people will see the situation that came up for me, which was there was a situation in my church. There's an accuser and the accused. And by the time we did all the investigative, we went to a deep investigative process. We brought an overseer. I mean, we went through a lot. We went through, it lasted longer than even our overseer said it should have.
Beyond.
Yeah. And but because of who it involved, I didn't think we could not put in the work.
Right.
So by the time it was all said and done, we landed, the overseers landed, a lot of fasting, a lot of praying. And after that happened, the guns turned on me.
Right.
And it went from the accuser and the accused to the accuser now pointing the guns at me. And by this point, they had already built this small army in the church of people that were coming after me. And
then confirmation bias kicks in.
Well, that's the problem, right? Like that's the issue that we deal with when people come after us is what we talk about in the blog. We know the best and the worst parts of us.
Yeah.
And so because we know we know what people say about us and we buy into the hype, right? Which is, you're great, you're amazing, you're an awesome leader. Look what you built. Look what God's doing. 25 years in ministry, or 25 years at Coast, 45.
26 at Coast, 34
total
full-time ministry, and music ministry before that.
Yeah, and then 50. How many years in?
44.
44 years in ministry. So we've got tenure. You've got all these. We've got all of this. Yeah, in to say for you, right? So we know what we've done. We know what we've built. We know. So here and then we've got the accolades. We got the people that applaud. We've got all that going for us, and we've bought into the hype.
Right.
But we know when we look in the mirror, we don't really believe it. We believe the lies that the enemy continues to sow in our mind. You're not good enough. You're a terrible pastor. You're a terrible leader. You're a narcissist. Because the line between narcissism and leadership is finer than a hair. Right? Because you have to mobilize people to do things that they don't want to do to accomplish the vision that God has for their life. So you have to lead them to want to do the thing they don't want to do. Right. But if you lead them to do the thing they don't want to do, they can call you a narcissist or they can call you a great leader. And it depends on how they're feeling that day. Right. And that's really difficult. Now, at the end of the day, good leaders do it because it's what's best for you. Narcissists do it because it's what's best for them. That's the line, right? But at the end of the day, on the surface, it can feel the same. And we can look in the mirror and start to doubt ourselves. And so here we are weighing those things out, and we're believing the lies. And so when the guns turn on us, all it does is remind us of what we partially agree with already, which is that I'm a terrible leader. I'm selfish. I'm motivated by glory. Like all these things that thank God I had some people around me.
But left unchecked, where does that take you?
Dark. Oh my gosh. Well, he was in the room. I kicked a hole in the wall. like when it reached its boiling point. Now, I will say that it triggered it triggered something in me that I had thought I had dealt with from my childhood that I hadn't dealt with.
Right.
So there was an element of that it set in motion some things that were 25 years old. Yeah. So part of it wasn't just that it was the situation, it was triggering some things in me that I thought I had dealt with, but as we know, you never really deal with the things that shape you that deeply. But at the end of the day, like I lost it, man. I saw red, kicked a hole in the wall, took off out the door, and like I was in such a dark place, and I was full of rage. But again, because I gave my life to these people. I mean, they've never asked for anything that I said no to. Some of the things I said yes to, I should have said no to. Yeah. And that was why I was like, now you're turning the guns on me? Like, I get it. You feel that this thing happened to you or whatever, but now you're turning them on me? Like, That's wild. And that was what I was dealing with, and it just took me to a dark place because left unchecked, it felt like it was me against the world.
But you made a really courageous decision because you didn't leave it unchecked. You got proactive. You started talking to a counselor.
I already had a counselor before that. I called him within 10 minutes.
You immediately engaged.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yes.
And I know this about you, that you have pastors around you that you can pull off the mask, that you can be real with.
100%.
But part of the thing that I was talking about in my part of the blog is that most pastors do not have that.
Yes.
One, they don't have a counselor because for years that was a stigma. That if you talk to somebody, I mean, and I think everybody needs a counselor, right? Because we all have issues.
Correct, 100%. Right?
If you don't think you have issues, that's your issue.
That's your issue.
But I think everybody needs a good counselor to talk to. But beyond that, they need people that they can be real with and say, this is what I'm feeling. It's ugly. I need to talk it through with somebody. If there's even an ounce of truth that I am this dark person that I'm feeling I am right at the moment, then I need to know about it.
Yeah.
And I need a pathway to deal with it, even if it takes me out of ministry.
Exactly. Well, and the necessity behind that is that those people in your life can't only have a vantage point, or their vantage point can't only be your success stories. It can't only be your highlight reel.
Right.
I say it often. I think my dad says it more often than I do now, that I say, which is you got to have someone in your life that knows enough about you that they could destroy you, but loves you so much that they won't.
Right.
In other words, you have to have someone that knows the behind the scenes you, so that when you call them for confirmation, is this true or is this not true, they can speak truth to you, and you know it's truth.
Yeah.
Because they know you.
Yeah.
Because the problem is if you're not if you don't have someone in your life you're honest with like that, you're going to call them for confirmation, and when they tell you it's not true, in the back of your mind you're going to go, yeah, but you don't really know me because I haven't exposed this part of my life to you. And so you have to have somebody that you've been completely honest with.
Why do you think pastors are so afraid to hit that level of transparency, even with people that they might trust? I mean, they might go, I know this person, I know they've got my best interest at heart. They're going to walk me through, no matter how the road takes it, they're going to walk me through what's best for me and my personal walk with God.
Yeah.
There's that lingering thought back there that if I open up to that degree, it's not if, but when is this going to come back and bite me?
Right.
In pastors' day, sadly.
Yeah.
But there's some of us, thank God, that have said, I'm willing to take that risk. Mm-hmm. And that's what you have to do. If you're going to be that person that's truly going to be well and whole, and, a wound doesn't get healed unless you open it up and get some salve in there and get some right things in there. In the same way in our life, every one of us, doesn't matter how big our church is, how anointed we are, how much God's using us, we all have that. The Bible said, lay aside the sin, singular, and weights, plural. that easily beset us, which means to ambush. And that's the journey of every person. But
my question for you is, why didn't you? Like, I hear what you're saying, but Pastor Robert's question was, why do we think people don't share what they're going through, right? And we know your story of just, and we don't have to go through the story, but you had 20 years of something that was inside of you, a secret, not something you did, something that was just from your childhood. You had 20 something years or more of something. And why didn't you talk to someone? Or at least on this surface, I know the answer, but they need an answer. I know that you did, but why didn't you? So it's like,
well, I mean, because I was 12 when the event happened, and so at that point you're just afraid. You're just in a survival mode.
Yeah.
And I was a leader. I mean, I was, baseball, president of art club, vice president of my class for every year, very popular in school. I wasn't like this kid over here withdrawn.
Right.
But inside there was this monster, and the older I got, the more I knew it was there. And then leading and pastoring, and then going, okay, God, what about me? And then I'm preaching around the country in front and watching hundreds in the altar get healed, and you're praying for them, and God's giving them their freedom, and you're going back to a hotel room going, okay, when's my turn? And then when I finally did go and talk to some pastors, they meant well. One thing, the church never really focused on what we're talking about. It was never talked about. Pastor is supposed to be well, strong, got anointing, calling of God. You're the guy all the time.
That's right.
And so when I did go and ask for help, I got an arm put around my back, and the anointing of God's on your life. You're okay. And I wasn't okay. And then when I won the last one I went to, my wife was always with me. And instead of, I told my story, and then all of a sudden they turned it on me and made me, the guilty. You caused this.
Wow.
You're the one that, this is not even about what happened to you, it's what have you done. And I was sick. My wife, I literally threw up going to the car. And I told God that day, I will never talk to anybody about this again.
Bingo.
And then my world had to crash in 1998, totally crashed. And it caused that to finally find healing.
Yeah.
And even then it was a journey.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that, and even from the crash, it wasn't until recently, over the last few years, you started dealing with, so the crash was the byproduct of the hurt, but then you had to get healing from the crash.
Before you can deal with the hurt.
Before, like, you know what I mean? It's like, so that it really is, and there was a season of your life where you weren't even willing to deal with the healing from the crash, right? Like for whatever reason. Going back to your question, it's like, why don't we talk about these things? Like, not only did you not talk about the original hurt, then you crashed in 1998 because of the hurt, but then it took you 20 something years to talk about the crash and to get healed from the crash that was caused by the hurt. Like, so it's just.
So there was a 20-year thing here, and then you had a thing that happened, but fortunately you already had a counselor in place. You already had good friends that you could be real with and share with.
Yeah.
It's a massive difference.
Yeah.
It's a massive shift.
Yeah.
So why are pastors so lonely and so isolated when they can turn those paradigms around?
Well, yeah, and I think what he said is so true, which is we don't feel like we can trust anyone. B, this is mine. This was me when I went through what I went through recently, and I even talked about it at one point. Is I was holding the fragility of my ministry in my own hands.
Right.
I felt like everything that I had built, quote unquote. So, every pastor gets that. Every church member might think that's, very conceited. I felt like everything I had built was on the verge of falling apart.
Right.
The reality was 5 people were mad at me.
Yeah.
But in my mind, this whole thing is coming undone and it's going 200 miles an hour. That was how I felt.
Also because it triggers all those internal insecurities.
Right, exactly. Everyone's leaving. Everyone sees the fraud. And so we don't feel like we have anyone we can trust. We feel like far too much of the success of our church is on us. Yeah. I would say the failure of the church can be on you, but the success never is. Right. So you can burn this thing down if you choose to with the wrong decision, but you won't make it successful all on your own. So fast forward, we don't have anyone we trust. And then the other side of that is we don't have anyone we're completely honest with. And I mean a counselor or a therapist or something like that. The beauty behind counselors and therapists are they're contractually obligated to keep your secrets. You know what I mean? So that is very beneficial because you have a lot of confidence to say, I don't have to worry about this showing up in the newspaper, or fast forward to 2024, social media. Yeah. We don't have to worry about this showing up somewhere that I can deal with this pain.
Because you have to deal with it.
Because you have to deal with it.
Chris Hodges, I don't know if he's the one where it originated, but he's the one that I've heard it say over and over again, and I keep coming back to it.
You're only as sick as your secrets.
You're only as sick as your secrets.
That's right.
And it's so true. And it's such a... For most pastors, when they hear that for the very first time, there's like this, oh my gosh, thing inside of you. And you start thinking, I don't even know where I could begin to find somebody to tell them my secrets. Yeah. What would you say to them?
Start with us. Start with pastor to pastor. I mean, we can connect you not only to one of us, we can also connect you to a group of pastors that we believe you can trust that way. So not only a one-on-one setting, but we can also get you into group settings.
And we've also developed groups around ourselves. Each of us have pastors that we relate to that we know we could call up on a 100%. Moment. Some of which, like I was mentioning, a group of guys that I text with every single day.
Yeah. Yep.
It's you have to have people around that.
Absolutely.
And they can do that. It's easy enough to do.
Yeah, you'd be shocked. Here's what I would say. For those pastors that are out there, you're in isolation. Give us 4 days and let us take you on a retreat. And I promise you'll have at least 2 people that you feel like you can contact on the regular. Give us 4 days. Matter of fact, for most of you, we can get you on it for free. Like we'll get you on a retreat, but give us 4 days, and I promise you'll have 1 or 2 people that can be on that list for you. Because we'll put you on a retreat. And by the way, on that retreat, you can go fishing, skeet shooting, you can shoot guns, eat some great food, laugh a lot. Like it's a great time. But
your next best friend may be on that retreat.
Yeah, 100%. All the guys that are in that circle for me now, I met on a retreat somewhere. Yeah. 100%. So I think for pastors, I would say let us help you with that. But it starts with reaching out. Call us, contact us, send us an email, do something. But again, you're only as sick as your secrets, and we can also even reference you for counseling. So if you need help getting in contact, where do I even start with that? Who do I even call? We can help you with that too. So I think that's really, really important as well. But I think the big thing for pastors is we have to, first of all, we have to stop believing the lies. Right. We got to come away from that. And when I was writing the blog, one of the things I sat down and kind of wrote out that I think would take a few minutes and hit on is these 3 things that I did, and I'm not clairvoyant. I think God just led me to these things, and so these aren't the only 3 things you can do. These are just the 3 things I did. All right, so but 3 things that when I walked away from that moment of rage and trauma and all that cycling at the same time, called my counselor. 10 minutes after that, I need to talk to you. We set up a time. I got on a Zoom call with him and processed all of that and how it connected to other things like we talked about and really dealt with. And one of the things he challenged me with is, one of the things I love that he said to me is, who do you think you are? It's like, 5 people in your church don't like you? Calm down. Let's bring it down a second. And he spoke to me that way because I need to be spoken to that way. He would have been more gracious with someone else. But who do you think you are? Like, you're not, all this isn't coming down just because 5 people, just, let's take the foot off the gas for a second. But then as I talked with him, I was led to do 3 things. One is we got to get clarity.
Yeah.
And I think the best way we can do that is to step away from the noise. And when I say the noise, I think a lot of times people think I'm talking about bad noise. So get away from all the bad chatter. But I'm talking about all the noise, the good and the bad. Social media is great, But as you guys both know, it can boost your ego, and that's the good noise, and it can also tear you down, and that's the bad noise.
And both of them can be dangerous.
But both of them are noisy. That's right. Yeah, but the ego boost isn't always beneficial, right? Like sometimes the last thing we need to do is get more elevated, right. But to me, it wasn't that I needed to get away from the negativity. It was that I needed to get away from the noise. And those things aren't the same. There are seasons where I need to be away from the negativity, which is pretty much all the time. But I needed to be away from the noise because I had realized that it had gotten really hard to hear God trying to tell me what to do because I was so consumed by text messages and voicemails and screenshots of other people's conversations and Facebook and Instagram posts and, finally found a good church posts and all those things. I was like, oh, gosh. So I needed to get away from the noise. And so I turned everything off for 3 days and got real quiet to hear God's voice and let a father talk to a son. Just turn off the noise, man, and let God do a healing work in my heart. Remind me why I do this. Remind me why I torture myself. I mean, pastor a church. Remind me why I said yes to this in the first place. I didn't say yes to this for everyone to like me. I said yes to this because God called me to it. So remind me of the things that I said yes to. I've never been the type of person that I was always liked. So why do I think that's a thing now? And just really refocus that. So I had to get clarity. I had to get away from the noise. The second thing I had to do was really start to pull myself. Well, before I say that, I want to find out from you guys, when we talk about pull away from the noise, what does that look like for y'all? I know what it is for me, but for someone out there, it may be different than what it is for y'all.
Well, for me, I mean, the concept of a Sabbath, having a day a week, and my wife happens to take the same day off so that we can have that day off together. It's our quiet time together. It's the church stuff is disconnected. I mean, I still do my personal quiet time and all of that sort of stuff is still a normal part of my routine in my day. But I'm talking about it's my disconnect from the mechanism. Mm-hmm. Not my disconnect from the Holy Spirit, not my disconnect, but my disconnect from the mechanism. That's important. You need time away. You need to see your hometown in the rearview mirror every now and then. Come on, man. Yeah. And and even with that, the problem with that is if you take a week off, it takes you 2 to 3 days into that before you finally start shutting down. Right. You have about 1 or 2 days where you're shut down, and then you start ramping back up because you're getting ready to head back in. Yep. And you've had to work like crazy to be able to take the week off, and you have to work like crazy to catch up from the week that you were gone. Yep. So you've got to be intentional about getting that time. Yep. And finding those times where you just get in a place where you have time to just be quiet.
That's so good.
Be still and know God.
I know 3 years ago, my wife and I were coming off of a very dark journey for her, and thankfully God's brought healing in that, but I was wore out. And that's when I went to the first retreat there, and I went to receive, and God just connected so powerfully that week. It was such a dynamic week, not only a healing in my life that at that moment, but relationships that are now flourishing in my life that are keeping me healthier than I've ever been. Yeah. That's where I just want to throw a plug in again. Man, to pastors, contact us and let us get your church. If you'll contact us, we'll help your leadership see the need of you're getting away part of your mission funds, to make that an annual part of your wholeness and wellness for you and your wife is a necessity. It's not an option. Yeah. That you've got to get away and find safe places to rest.
Yeah, I would say what you're saying is that's so important is we have a way, Pastor to Pastor has a way of showing you how you can utilize your national missions budget to help other pastors around the country, but it also will help you. We have a way that we can do that, so we can get you a letter for your board that you can show them, and they can vote on a way that not only does it provide a resource for other pastors, but it does for you as well. The last two things that I'll mention that I did. So the first one is I got clarity. The second one was I needed to start looking at what was going right. it's so easy to see the wrong things. Man, this is going wrong, and that person's talking bad, and the social media posts and whatever. And I had to come back to, you know what, but that marriage is getting restored. That person, you know, I think we baptized like 36 people in 2 months or 3 months in that particular time frame. Yeah. And I was like, man, it's like these 5 people, but then there's 36. And it was like, man, there's some really good things happening in my church. And I'm not going to let this thing define this season of our church in my life. And so
the good thing is that it's like driving. And if you're driving and you look at something, you immediately start turning towards it.
That's so true.
So what you focus on is what you move towards.
You're going to move towards. That's
if you
good.
Focus on the negative, you're going to move towards the negative, and it's going to get dark.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last one, I'll say this, and it kind of full circle, even back to what we were talking about with the retreats, is I text 2 or 3 of my pastor buddies. 2 of them went with me, but I texted a few of my pastor buddies. It's like, guys, I'm going through it right now. I just need some time. And we all stayed at an Airbnb about an hour away from here and played golf the next day. Yeah. And we laughed. And I needed brothers. I needed some guys around me that we could laugh and that understood the struggle, the pressure. They knew, and I needed to be around my brothers, and so I came back from just one day with those guys was super, super refreshing. So those are the 3 things that I needed, but at the end of the day, we can help you with those things, but just reach out to us. And so the reality is, whether we're talking about rest or whether we're talking about perseverance, at the end of the day, you need to know you're not alone in this. You're gonna go through hard times, and those are just a few stories of the many we could have shared. You're not alone in this. Just know that we and God wants to see you finish strong. We want to see you do well, and we can help you with that. So if you choose to be alone, after you watch this or listen to this, if you choose to be alone, now it's on you, not on anybody else. Because if you want to choose to be part of a network that'll help take care of you, contact us. Go to pastortopastor.life. You can find out all the contact info. Reach out to us. We want to be a part of helping you. All right, guys. Hey, Pastor Robert, thank you so much. Yeah. Pastor Dan, as always, thank you so much. And man, thank you guys for tuning in. You know where to find us. If we can do anything, let us know. Feel free to like, subscribe, share, do all the good things so that we can make sure we get the word out there to other pastors. We'll catch you next time for another episode of the Pastor to Pastor podcast.